It's a pleasure to be here at the Stanford Web Camp and to chat with all things CMS updates on cruise control with Autopilot, keeping your sites up to date and getting your updates deployed. It's very important for your sites. And one of the hope today is to sort of show you some techniques and some ideas that could be extraordinarily powerful for what we're trying to do. So to kick it off, like the big picture here is that like we all have a lot of stuff we need to do with respect to automatic updates and getting our websites in the kind of experience and delivering the kind of results that we expect. And that, you know, of all those tasks, the process of actually updating the websites is, you know, sort of not the most fun for developers or for people. It's very important, right? We need secure sites, but we have a lot of other stuff to do. And one of the great things about updates is that these are things that can be automatically done by robots. The process of checking to see if there's a new update, of applying the update, of even testing the update are all things we can do using some very basic open source tools or, you know, more packaged solutions. And so one of the things to check this out is a talk that I gave in Baltimore with my colleague Andrew Taylor, and then again at DrupalCon Europe in Vienna, where we went to Mozart's grave just to talk about how great the orchestration is here. Because it's possible to do what our friend Josh Koenig calls the holy grail of web ops, which is to create a process by which the robots will update the sites and make sure that everything is continually in the best kind of shape for you. And so at Pantheon, we have a solution. It's a solution you can also implement by yourself. We have code linked in the DrupalCon session that does that. But sort of what, you know, we've been working on for a couple of years at Pantheon is how can we take that kind of open source tools and implement it in a sort of one-click, easy to do functionality. Because I want to sort of convince everyone on this session that like what you want to do is keep your sites up to date. That even if you're running a small site, you know, if you have it on a Stanford Edu domain, if you have like important stuff on there, these are targets people have, and the internet is full of mischief. And so keeping yourself up to date is good. And that you should either have, you know, a team working on keeping up to date, or better, not have your team do it and instead, you know, do it automatically. Because this allows you to accomplish like very important goals for your site. You can keep your site up to date, you know, that you don't have to monitor the announcements. You don't have to worry about when stuff is released, like the robots will happy to do that work. And you can also bring in the new features of Drupal, things that are, you know, developed in coming down the pipe with new major version of Drupal, new features and modules, new theme functions. And those are things that you can build into your workflow and into your live site by simply just inheriting the updates that the larger open source community is doing. This is very much sort of why we use open source is to leverage all of this great stuff. So getting that sort of on board and going is a good plan. But, you know, there are costs to doing this. Like you can auto update your sites by simply just running, you know, drush update, you know, PM update -all like on a cron tab. But the problem is that like, you know, that will work most of the time. But when it doesn't work, we have a lot of problems because that can break the site. It can go down. We can like lose important functionality. We can basically cripple our experience for the sake of security, which is not the trade-off we want to do. And so sort of what a lot of folks do is sort of what I would call the hard way, which is they sort of do testing. So they'll apply the update to a test environment. And then you'll sort of click around and try to figure out if it's broken, you know, and you're playing this game of like trying to figure out like what changed on the site, which is like sort of hard to do, you know, like if it's totally broken, I guess that's easy. But, you know, if what we have are very small differences, things that actually come up all the time in Drupal programming, where, you know, a field label was hidden, but an update like makes the label now available, or a template shifted, or, you know, a block disappears or whatever, or a red error message shows up on some pages. Like finding these things is actually sort of hard for a human because you have to click through a lot of pages and you have to look for very, in some cases, minor details. And that's something that, you know, like I said, it's the hard way because you've got to do all this yourself. But the idea of looking at pictures and telling if there's differences, which I put is sort of like the most important test you can do on a security update, is something that robots can easily do. Like a security update should not change the pixels on your site. It should like filter some database keys going in the abstraction layer, or like do some additional sanitization for like weird input. Like you don't need a new block on your site to make your site secure. So as long as you have this sort of process of looking at all the old pages, looking at the new pages, there's a lot of confidence you can get. And that's basically what this Autopilot solution is, or what you can sort of build yourself if you want to sort of DIY the whole thing. Because, there's always two options in life. You can, pilot the plane yourself, which is quite fun, I suppose, but also risky. Or you can just sit back and let somebody else do it. But in general, like this is the kind of process that I think sort of every serious Drupal website should do. And it goes something like this, that, when you're talking about an update, you should check to see if there's updates. If there is updates, you should create a new environment that's like a copy of your live environment with everything the same, except you actually then apply those updates. And once those updates are applied, you have two sites, the sort of live site and then your canary sort of update site. And then you need to go do some visual regression testing between those two sites. You want to look at as many pages as possible to identify, key areas where there might be differences. And then you take all of those pictures together and you use the computer to run through them all very quickly. And the computer can then tell, like, are there pixel differences? Are those differences important? Like you can exclude certain things or allow for a certain kind of fuzz. But if those tests pass, then we have this process of then pushing it on through to our development environment test and then our final production environment. And that way you sort of have this confidence where you can always inject more testing. You can throw some BHAT testing in, you can do other kinds of security testing or other kinds of behavioral unit testing. But the idea is that you have this framework where it's then easy to sort of extend what's going on. And that, going through this process is something people do manually, but it's all stuff you can do automatically. And I think in the name of the game of trying to get a lot of stuff going, this is really sort of what's going on. So that's sort of the big picture of what I want to talk about, like in terms of like how this kind of approach can work. Because getting your sites up to date, having that happen while you sleep, walking in the morning on Thursday and having a full updated site that's passed tests and is in fact deployed to production is a huge time saver. And that's a huge time saver on just one site. But if you're in a situation, you're in a university or a large organization, you just have more than a few of these sites, every Wednesday when security updates come out, that's a lot of work. And so this is something that we think can be easily automated. It's stuff you can build to automate or something that you can have someone else build. So let me show you sort of what's going on here. This is the stuff we built, obviously, but all these same patterns you can also do yourself if you really like that kind of internet plumbing. Sort of I'll cruise over. So I work at Pantheon, and this is Pantheon. This is our new dashboard. So we run a decoupled front end to actually do the magic. And so we've got this new version of it. And specifically, there's this new version of this Autopilot feature. And what this is basically all of that update logic that I was showing sort of baked into the product. So it's basically implementing this workflow. And so what you can do is for every single site that you have, you can go in and actually go through a very like straightforward setup process. Like part of the value of visual regression testing is that you don't need to like define really like fancy kind of stuff. And to do these deployments, you don't have to have very fancy rules. You just have to make some decisions. Like, do you want to update your core CMS? Like, yeah, probably. Do you want to update your modules that are part of the situation, or do you want to update your themes? And you can sort of select those options as well. This will also include any Composer kind of packages. I think with Drupal 9 especially being so like dependent on Composer, that using Composer to manage your stuff is the right way, and this will support that. If you build this yourself, I would definitely build Composer updates into it. I might just build that, honestly. But this will support sort of any use case. You sort of define your scope of what you want to do. And then you can define in terms of your destination and frequency, you can sort of define if you want where you want to deploy the updates. So when you're thinking about updates, like, deploying directly to the live environment is going to be the most secure option. This means that if the tests pass, then everything will automatically go out and will be then updated immediately. But if you do have additional QA or review, you could, for example, just deploy it to the testing environment, and then you would have access to like sort of review it. You could also then specify how quickly the updates run, once a day, once a month, or just on demand. And that's sort of up to what you want to do there. All of these kind of things are also like easily like hookable or triggerable with our API. So you can set up really fun stuff like when a test passed, you can like send a congratulations to your internal Slack channel, or you can send emails to people if stuff doesn't pass, or you can customize that so that you're then notified with what's going on, even if it's just to say, oh, it's cool, it's done. And I think that's something when you're sort of building out like workflows and developer pipelines, like you don't want to be overly chatty, but like communicating the important information, like updates applied to a team, is really important. And it also helps people just to understand the flow of what's going on. The actual testing is we use visual regression testing. Or the open source code we had on this is using Backstop.js, which is an excellent package. I'd absolutely recommend it to everyone here if you want to get into visual regression testing. It uses Chrome headless browser to load up different versions of the site. And then you can specify here in the sort of page URLs, the individual pages that you think are sort of representative of your site. And then you can specify how much change is sort of acceptable on them. And we'll see in a minute, sort of visual regression works in percentages. So sometimes things might change a little bit, like you might have like a random quote or featured staff profile or an ad region or something. And those are things that you might want to like add a little more acceptable change, or you can exclude based on DOM rules coming soon, but you can sort of specify some selector paths, and then we'll just ignore those for the purpose of the build. And this is stuff you can build out. Stuff will eventually automate in terms of just looking at your sitemap or something, but you sort of can provide your test plan. And then if you're so inclined, you could then exclude certain plugins or modules. We all definitely had experiences where a Drupal module might be really hard to update right now, or actually have a problem. And we want to wait till the next version. So you can do various exclusions as well. And once you sort of get to that point, what will happen is that this site will then sort of run those updates, and it can like give you various, status activity of what's going on. So, like we have like the upstream got updated, Drupal itself got updated, and then we applied the updates to the dev site, which is what we want, which we can then look at. And so this is the kind of thing you could also put into Slack and sort of see what's going on here, which is pretty fun. And when this works, you sort of get this like, site where you see your sort of status of all of your sites, and it'll tell you, hey, are there updates? What's going on with the update process? So you can then at a glance see what's going on. And I think if you build something like this yourself, like trying to surface that information to everyone can let you go in and in one screen see how up to date your sites are, because that's something that's like very important to report on, very important to be aware of, and the kind of thing that allows you as a developer team to take action to like make things better. Because stuff breaks, obviously, that's why we test. And you'll sort of see these failed jobs that are failed. And if they're failed, you can then go in and you can review those test results, where you're actually then going to be able to access. You'll see here we actually have the different images. So on the right side is like the after image, and on the before is the other image. And you'll see here we actually can show that this block totally disappears from the site. And that's not the kind of update we want, of course. Like we want to have our full content. But if it wasn't for the visual regression screenshot, we very might easily have missed that on this one particular page, this block is not available. It's only a small pixel difference, but it is a very meaningful business or organizational value. And this is the kind of thing that you can then, you can discard the test, you can approve it and deploy it anyway, or, you can like, change some of your values to make sure this automatically keeps working. But it's this kind of smarts where as a developer, like the only human attention I have to spend on my updates is just looking at the parts where the computer vision is like, hey, there's something different. Is this okay or not? And if it's not okay, you can fix it and then deploy it. It'll then work again. Or you can just say, okay, that's fine. That's in the gray area of life. And so you do it that way. And then you're sort of off to the races again. So Autopilot definitely is a very, sort of powerful solution. We build at Pantheon, but it's the kind of thing that anyone can build if you're like, building your own hosting platform or just implementing your own internal workflows. It's just about trying to like make sure you get the robots, updating the sites, doing some tests to make sure that that feels good. And then if everything's good, deploying it. Because it's way better to get a Slack message saying everything's cool, we did all the work for you, than like, be afraid that you have like a bunch of sites that are, you don't know when they're updated. This makes it a lot better. So that's generally Autopilot for y'all, talking about automatic updates and visual regression in the CMS space. My name is Matthew Cheney, and thank you all for coming to my quick 20-minute session on how to be on cruise control. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, feel free to ask questions to Matt. This Zoom session is going to be open. So if you want to stay a couple more minutes, you don't have to cut off at 11:20.
Yeah, absolutely. So just some questions. I was just vibing. So just to roll back, Sean was asking about if Autopilot works with Internet Composer, which it does. Probably got to that right afterwards. Internet Composer is basically the ability to run Composer on Pantheon. And so because we know the Composer packages you run, we can update Drupal core, Drupal themes, Drupal modules, as well as any third-party PHP package you might have. Another question is, can you set the visual test pages or pass percentage in code? So currently that's not supported, but we do at Pantheon have a Terminus command line interface that will support this relatively quickly. And we're also going to like automatically generate a list of URLs just to start you off by just looking at your sitemap and saying, hey, here's some representative URLs. And those will be configurable in code. Especially if we have lots of sites, it's better to sort of set it up easier. And we want to make that real. Question from Marina is the name of the visual library I mentioned. That's Backstop.js. I'll link it here in the chat. If you want to just like do visual regression testing, which is also, by the way, useful just for like development too, like the ability to have just see what changed just for like a pull request is also pretty valuable. You could just run Backstop.js as a tool on your local like laptop. You just give it 2 URLs and it goes and does that. That's very, very powerful. All right, let's see. Ryan. Oh yeah, Ryan's pointing out the docs. The Composer stuff is new. We did just add that. Ryan was also asking about custom upstreams and on what will be supported for sites attached to the stream. So the answer to that is this plays very nicely with custom upstreams on Pantheon. That's our approach, where you have like one common code base and then you like make like 50 sites from it. And the updates honestly work best with that use case because you have 50 sites that are all inheriting the same updates. And so you can use the Autopilot like testing and deployment functionality for anything you put in your custom upstream. So if you're deploying out like an update university-wide on branding, you can have that be in the upstream. People could get some new like stuff in the library. Thanks to Lindsay, Ryan, and Sharon for thanking me.
There's a question from Joe Beltran. I'm trying to figure out. Okay, did I unmute you? Okay.
Hi. I wanted to know if Pantheon automatically migrates or updates the Drupal core from 8 to 9.
So yeah, that's a great question. Drupal 8 to 9 is a much easier upgrade than all the other upgrades ever in Drupal. But it's technically because it is a major update, by default, our composer file, I think, will not do that, but you can change it so that you can do it. Composer 9 or Drupal 9 does have a deprecation schedule for code. So if you updated it, like, you may very well need to change some stuff. It's not super hard, but because if you're in the composer, this is all if you have to be on composer. If you're on composer, you can just change your composer file. And if you're interested on that on Pantheon, we're actually doing Drupal 8 to Drupal 9 office hours, like twice a week for the next like month or two.
Oh, great.
And so you can come in and talk to me or Greg Anderson or like any of the smart people that work on this at Pantheon, and we can help you move it to Composer or help you, like, there's some upgrades too, like you use a new MariaDB 10.4 database as part of Drupal 9.
Matt, do you want to post either hours or link to this hours in chat? That would be
Yes,
very
let me,
helpful, and then we'll put it into session to make it easier for people. Thank you. This
Yeah.
is awesome.
Yeah, we're definitely vibing this office hours concept. We're also doing it with Autopilot. So I'll send the link around here. But if you have questions on Autopilot or want to see more of it, we every week we'll just sit down. You can just kind of ask questions or see what's going on. But yeah, maybe I'll take it back to you on that link, and we'll get it in the session description. But you can just come chat me up or email or otherwise engage us. We love to chat with people about all things Pantheon here at the Stanford Web Camp and beyond. All right. Oh, thank you, Arena, for beating me to finding stuff on my own website. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming and paying attention. Definitely check this out. We've got it at Pantheon now. If you don't have it turned on, just ask us. We're rolling it out. And have a good time at the Stanford Web Camp. It's exciting to present virtually, and hope the next few days are very productive for everyone involved.